The next day, I called up my fiancée in Tasmania excitedly about all the information that I had gleaned. I told her, I think Islam might be the truth. I tell you what, she had that same sound that I had when I asked the question about the fasting. However, she told me later that she was thinking that I was, in Arabic, I think the term is majnoon. Majnoon? Yeah, obviously. For the rest of our guests, it means I was certifiably insane. I listened to some tapes on Islam. The brothers gave me several books. I took the car that I had come for, and I left back to Tasmania. And that was the end of that for a time. The books stayed in the bag. The parties continued. And although I definitely had a different and softened view of Islam, I made no certain steps towards it. But now, an event was to happen, which led to the serious re-evaluation of my position on Islam. Let me begin, my brothers, sisters, and guests, that this part of my story, Allah willing, by saying that the most important result is the understanding of the true idea of Allah and His final revealed religion. What I'm about to relay is something that I have not told many people, Muslim or non-Muslim alike, about, because the event itself has the effect of greater interest than the result, which is my path to the truth of Islam. My then fiancée had been on antidepressants for months, and she suffered from severe onset bouts of depression. That night was typical for us at our house, lots of friends over, movies and drinks. A small issue arose between my fiancée and I, and she stormed to her room, fuming over what I thought was nothing. The slam of the bedroom door behind her caused a little consternation amongst our guests, but soon all was normal. Minutes later, my guests had gone back to their TV or their computer. I began feeling a little uneasy, so I went to check. I went to check on her. The door was locked. I thought maybe she needed a little time, but still, it was reluctantly that I went back. All of a sudden, my fiancée screamed my name. Somehow, I already knew what had happened. I yelled to her, the door was locked. Just as I was about to break it down, she unlocked it. I barged into the room, and the next however many minutes were a blur. The first and only thing that registered in my mind at that moment and after was the blood spurting from her wrist. She had it over a bucket, and the redness is still what comes to my mind. She was crying as she looked up at me. I ran to her, and all I could say is, "Why did you do it? Why?" I needed the answer because I thought I had lost her. As the blood flowed between my fingers, I thought this was the last I would see of my fiancée. But Triple O was called, the wound was wrapped and pressurized, and she was taken to hospital. She had planned her suicide meticulously, from the local anesthetic she applied to her arm, to the bucket to catch the blood, to the direction of the surgical cut, to the attempted overdose of antidepressants and painkillers. After a hospital stay was the time of psychiatrists, rehabilitation for the wrist. Yet even after extensive visits to the psychiatrists, doctors, and personal counselling, both before and after the event, no one could pinpoint the problem. After a few weeks, I had sold a car and I needed to go back to Melbourne to drop it off. I kept in contact with the brothers and I arranged to stay in the same place as before. We sat and we talked again about Islam, and I enjoyed my time immensely, although I felt a little distant. The time came for me to sail back to Tasmania, but the phone call told me that I was going to be delayed. The news disturbed me. I felt bad enough already for leaving my fiancée so early after the devastating event. The brother knew something was not right, and he asked me. I refused to answer. He continued to badger me, may Allah reward him abundantly, until I finally gave in. I told him my fiancée's attempt on her life, the severe bouts of depression. "I think I know what's wrong with her," he said. Now you have to understand, months of psychiatrists and professional doctor visits, supplemented by many medications, had gotten us no closer to a solution. But here was this Muslim, used car, Japanese vehicle import specialist stating he knew what was happening. Surely not. He asked me some questions. Is she young and attractive? He said. I was wondering where he was going. Yes. Does she wear tight clothing? Now, I know you guys can have 4 wives, but keep your hands off my fiancée, huh? However, I answered sometimes. Then followed other questions which I can't remember even to this day. Yes, he said, I know what's wrong with your fiancée, but you won't believe me, so I can't tell you. Well, let me tell you, I was not going to give in that easily. Now it was my turn to badger him. He finally gave in. He said, your wife is possessed. Alarm bells in my head went crazy. This is the very essence of what I, as a Jehovah's Witness, had been taught to stay away from. But we had exhausted all other possibilities. So the brothers and other brothers, may Allah reward them all, related their experience and knowledge about this subject, which was quite extensive. I was still skeptical, but the brother gave me some Quran on a tape which was specially selected for such a purpose, as well as some water which had the Quran read on it. Where else could we turn? It was only a matter of time before my fiancée attempted what she had done again, and maybe this time God would not allow me to be able to intervene. Back in Tasmania, and I related what I had found to my fiancée. She looked at me briefly with a look of shock. Had my fiancée gone even more majnoon, her looks seemed to say? What were these guys in Melbourne doing to David? Okay, let's try it, she said. She, like me, had given up on all other forms of help. We locked ourselves in a room one night. We put on the tape. I gave her a glass of the water periodically. She swayed slightly, but I was expecting something more. We swapped the tape side over. It was quite a warm night, so I got thirsty and I drank some of the water, and some more. I began to feel a little strange, but I had been on a long journey, so maybe it was fatigue. Suddenly I murmured something softly. My fiancée looked at me. What was that, she asked. My mouth moved, and a voice said, it burns. A voice I had not made before came out of my lips. The mouth was mine. The voice, changed as it was mine. But it was not me speaking. It burns, I said louder than before, and a hand that was mine but I was not controlling reached out to turn the tape off. My wife restrained it. I was possessed. As the nights went on, events unfolded. Sayings were said. The thoughts came forth, all of which were arising from my body, but were not mine. It is hard to describe, other than to say that you were taking a back seat to all of the proceedings. You see, you hear, you touch, you taste, you feel everything that happens, but your mind is not in control. We found, as the night went on, that my wife was possessed also, as the brother had suspected. This was the final hit around the head that Allah had provided, that we needed to open up our minds to the possibility that Islam might be the truth. But it could not be the final chapter of our search, for many other religions espouse miracles and paranormal activities such as these. But it accelerated our interest, and for me in particular, it was really the impetus I needed. Almighty Allah be praised. My wife and I scrambled for those as yet undisturbed books in the bag, unpacked. We read. And we read. And we read some more. Amazed, we continued to delve into the truth. We read Let the Bible Speak. We read Muslim-Christian Dialogue. We read A Brief Illustrated Guide to Understanding Islam. And we read yet more. What impacted me the most? I cannot pinpoint it. There are so many points.